can speak a bit to the new work, Eel Dance, and I'd like to sort of try and tie that into my practice. But yes, Eel Dance, it's going to be floating out in Taylor's Lakes, and it's really a celebration of the eels. You know, that the area was largely swampland that's been variously drained and turned into a series of lakes and housing developments and parks. But you know, the eel, the short-finned eel, was a key denizen of those lakes. And a lot of my recent sculptural work, I've been trying to really highlight the natural environment that either has been replaced or is still there, but sort of a bit neglected. I mean, the eels are pretty amazing. I've had a few projects that have been eel themed in recent times and been learning about them. And they go from, you know, estuaries and things around the lakes, and they swim out to sea. They have these sort of spawning events, and they swim all the way up the coast of Australia to the Coral Sea, where they sort of mate and breed up there and then die. And then the next, you know, lot of eels make their way all the way back down and into the estuary. So they just have these incredible sort of eeling moments triggered. I don't think they quite know whether it's a lunar thing or what it is, but they all just sort of burst forth, and it's a big celebratory moment. So that's what I'm hoping to sort of capture a bit in this work. A large part of it is the lighting element. So at night time, it lights up, and it's got solar panels and batteries, so it sort of gathers the light. It's totally self-contained. Which I think is a nice model, that the work, you're not sort of sucking power or using resources to make pretty image, that the whole thing, once it's been created, is self-contained. It's actually a development I sort of stumbled on several years ago into this idea with the Lake Bolac Eel Festival. It was supposed to be a parade, and they wanted a bit of sort of Vegas and a bit of some light time to celebrate the eels at the lake, and these things were going to be carried on poles as a parade at the start, and then at the 11th hour they went, "These are amazing, let's put them out in the lake." So we sort of walked out with the poles and poked them there, and they all had batteries, so they were self-contained, so we could do that. And it was a music festival primarily on the edge of the lake, and it was just really lovely watching the reflections of the light off the water. And over the course of the evening, as the musicians played, then more and more people were sort of moving their chairs from the music place to sort of face them out, and they were just sitting by the edge of the music place looking at the eels and the light of the eels on the lake. And I just thought, oh, that's fantastic. I'd love to really scale that up or revisit it or make it a more permanent. Anyway, I'm just going to talk a little bit more, digress from the I'll come back to the making of the current sculpture soon, but the Lake Bolac Eel Festival and the environmental side of making works that speak to the ecosystems of the lake. And so that the festival's been really lovely, and over the last few years I've been doing a series of works there. They've got a strong Aboriginal connection there. It was always a gathering place, and when it was eel season, the various tribes would gather and have this festival when there was plenty of food around, but all the birds would come, and there's stories that relate to that gathering. And so there's all these birds that come. The brolga flies in, the emu was there, and so I've worked with some of the kids at the high school there and gathered a whole lot of materials, metal farm machinery and things off some of the paddocks around there, and then worked with the kids to turn these into some of the birds that feature in this story. And then the local elders then worked with a different group of students to harvest native grasses off the lake and weave these into the structures that we've made. So the whole thing for me had this fantastic, it brought together so many elements that a focus of my work, where it's looking at the environment, it's looking about the local people and the stories, and it's really anchored in the place there. And so for me, that's been a terrific sort of small scale thing that I can do every year or so that has been really rewarding. And another sort of a more recent public sculpture work that I did that explores similar themes is the Seal, which is down at Warrnambool. It's always sort of bothered me that in the middle of Warrnambool it could be Albury, or there was no real sense of the coast and the marine life or anything like that. And And I was a bit nervous when I was pitching that they'd be worried about their nice new pavers and things, but they got very excited, and so got to do it. I've been very happy with the seal, and again, it's that thing of getting people who are there to see it and think, oh, this is seal. There are seals. They live here. They're part of the environment, and just be aware of that. And one of my favourite things that's happened is that people have been using it as a bit of a soapbox to dress it up or comment on the sea plastics or the drift nets or that sort of thing. Going way back from there, I sort of came not from a sculpture background, but more from a film, television, animation, making films and things from here for various people. This was a series called Dust Echoes for the ABC, which was based on a series of Aboriginal stories from the Northern Territory, which was a fantastic, where it was really, they just wanted their stories told in different ways, which was great. And that was quite a formative piece, actually, because it was quite often when you work, I guess not as an artist, as a designer, there's a strange commerce sort of thing where people come and they've seen something you've made before and they want you to do something a bit like what you've done before. And the ABC were great because they didn't do that. And so every time I sort of got a chance where someone wasn't really prescribing, we want you to make something that looks just like what you've already made, I would go out of my way to pick a completely different visual style, just so that the next time then I had two styles that people could say, we want something like that or something like that. And if they didn't specify, then I would make a third thing in a very different style. So the next time there'd be three things that someone might say, oh, I want you to do something just like that. So I really, and this is a fairly early point in my practice, I would go out of my way wherever I could to make everything as sort of unique or as different as I could. So there's also a series of films I've made working with primary school students, and I've done probably 10 of these now around Australia and overseas, where going in, recording some stories from some of the older people in the community, and then working with the children in these communities to animate these stories. And again, it's not about the local ecosystems, but it's getting, through art, people to really think about a subject matter. So often there's young kids, 6, 7, just suddenly getting deeply invested in the stories of their community. So progressing along in my timeline from there, from making film, I worked with a few locals in Natimak. There's an aerial dance group who do, I guess they were largely climbers. Y Space was the name. It's sort of run by Gillian Pearce, and we talked about the possibility of combining my animated work with her aerial performance. And so for a Natimak Fringe Festival one year, we put together this vision to go onto the silo. There was a healthy dose of doing stuff I'd never done before in this project. This was back in 2003 or 4, where projection on buildings wasn't really much of a thing, and certainly not interactive projections, and certainly not combined with aerial. In fact, that's still a pretty niche field, I think. So I've sort of moved from straight film to combining film with performance with projection. And after this project, I've done a series of that, working with Legs on the Wall on the side of the NGV down in Melbourne. Lots of different, more recently in Bendigo, the Poppet Head. This was just late last year. So we had a commission there to turn, it's got this sort of iconic mining tower, Poppet Head, and to turn that into a canvas and project onto it. And again, this was a sort of a 360-degree experience. There's projectors on all sides, so people could walk around in the park. We then went back to the community and got various elements of the community to talk about, well, what would they do? How would they tell their stories? Or what would they like to see happen on this iconic structure in the middle of town? And so working with them, and then bringing, I suppose, the filmmaking skills and the aerial performance elements to just try and tell their stories. There's another projection here, which I worked with Mary French and Gillian at Barwon Heads in Geelong for the Geelong After Dark Festival. And I worked with the kids to animate all the fish that live in the waterways there, and then Mary French worked with them to make puppets, and I kept thinking, oh, I really like to be doing some of that puppetry thing. So I've been sort of engineering projects, big puppets and things like that, to fit in with projected shows. So it was a puppet that we made for another Natty Fringe festival that was 15 metres tall. You can see a little person for scale on the silos there, and managed just last year to reinvent this and put it into the Matoa stick shed, which pleasingly for me, they're really keen to explore different things that now that it's there, that people can do in it. So you can come and do a tour in the day, but they're really excited about the idea of theatrical events, or something that might bring people there in the evening, or just other ways that the space could be reimagined. So a big conveyor belt that runs right down the spine of the shed, and we thought we could put the whole puppet on this a track like a flying fox down there, so the puppet could walk from one end of the shed to the other, or 100 metres down the shed. And then found a group of keen kids from town to operate that. So it was such a privilege to be able to work in that space, and I really just had the keys to the town, and I could go in there and try this or that and see what worked and what didn't. More actual sculpture, where we've sort of abandoned the idea of theatre and performance, and it's purely about the sculpture. This is a work that's in Natamuck that was part of there was a funding to redevelop the centre of the town, and where the skate park was, to build an eating space and so have some shade sails, and myself and Sam Deal worked together to concoct out of a series of bits of things found from around the community an interactive kinetic sculpture. I mounted a projector in the head of this that projected up onto the shade sail, so when you moved around in the skate park, there was a camera that would track you if you had a light source, and that would feed into the projections, or you could press buttons. And there was a thing where someone could be in the skate park making lights while someone else spun wheels or press buttons on the thing, so you could have this collaboration with someone sort of physically moving in the space and someone controlling what that would do just by pressing buttons and turning knobs. So it was making a sculpture that was trying to engineer these little social gatherings or connections. And so a lot of my work, if people are interested, there's the Transients website that has all these various projects, whether it's projection, sculpture, animation. I might just quickly come back to the eels. There's a sort of a pattern, so all the bits, I had to work out how many of each thing I needed, and these you can see the fins, the bodies, and then these have all been laser cut out of stainless steel. I went off across the countryside in my trailer and gathered all the bits. I had a very similar experience to the seal, where due to the weight and the size of the trailer driving home again, I almost ran out of fuel. There's the thicker, this is the sort of thick plate which forms the structure at 8mm steel, so that provides a lot of the framework, and then a more delicate sort of reflective, sorry, I'll just go back, skin, which is clamped onto the surface, and then the lights, the LED, it's kind of a LED equivalent of neon lights, a clamp between the frame and the outer skins. This is me sort of making small piles of all of the bits, filling up my studio. I had to go through and completely gut and empty my studio from last sort of projects to make room for this, and then start with the pieces, and then gradually sort of clamping them together, curving the shapes of the frame, and then sticking the mesh layer onto that, welding that through. So that then gives me the sort of the shape and the framework. I've sort of through here now, but having sort of curved it, and then once you weld it together, it has sort of strength, almost like a laminated structure. So there's this, where the fins are here, that's going to remain see-through. So from the other side, you'll be able to see the lights through the body, and then in the central part where the body, this is where the reflective stainless outer surface is going to go at the top. Last Friday, these are all the floating. There's a sort of a modular pontoon system that I've researched, and this is going to be the thing that's going to hold the work aloft in the lake, which is great. It all locks together. It's all sort of signed off. It's a known thing, and it can just have as few or as many as needs be to make a stable sort of surface. This is a quick video. This is a lighting test I did with a piece. This is some of the neon flex is what it's called, but I'm just doing here in this video a test for the electrician. It's been a lot of that sort of research and design, I guess, for the project. It's all very exciting at the moment. It's good to see these, you know, having planned it. It's a very rewarding thing for me to see these things emerging and coming together. Taylor's Lakes, you know, in a couple of months' time, might have something a bit like this.